The Hart Trophy. So I'm worrying St. Louis for this because I don't have St. Louis on the board. Why? I don't think they have any one player that if you took him out of the lineup, the team wouldn't be successful. And that's kind of what the Hart Trophy's meant to signify is, boy, would this team be in trouble without that guy. And yet, if you don't make the playoffs, you probably can't win the Hart. So that's sort of the caveat around this as well. There are some teams that are on the board that aren't likely to make the playoffs. They might, they could, but likely don't. And so those players probably don't get the Hart Trophy. And yet, let's get into who's most valuable to their team right now and why. So I've got 10 names on the board, 9 teams. And I thought, yeah, that's good. And if a team's not on the board, it doesn't mean they're not having a good year. It means I'm looking at their team and going, there's no one guy. There's no one guy you can look at and say, he's it. For instance, Tampa Bay. You can't just look at Kucherov and go, well, that's the guy because there's point. Killorn's been really good for stretches this year. I wanted to say Cirelli, but I knew it wasn't Cirelli. So Killorn, Stamkos, Vasilevsky's been huge for them in net. There is no one player you can look at with Tampa, much like St. Louis, and say, well, he's been clearly the best player on that team. Arizona, we're going to start with Darcy Kuemper. Now, Darcy Kuemper and his .929 save percentage, that's pretty fancy save percentage. Now, Adin Hill, limited starts, has a .920. But the important one here is Antti Raanta with a .912. So, Arizona, they trade for Taylor Hall. People are looking at the record since they get Taylor Hall, and they go, this is the problem. You get Taylor Hall, and he weighs you down. No. Darcy Kuemper being out is, I think, the major problem for the Arizona Coyotes. Once he comes back, we'll have a better idea of what they're going to look like and whether or not they make the playoffs. Kuemper, very likely, could be the first goaltender to get some votes for the Hart. If he comes back and plays like that, and if they win first in the division, Kuemper will get some consideration for the Hart Trophy. Absolutely, and I agree with that. David Pastrnak in Boston. I have to put him on the board because he's the leading goal scorer, right? 70 points. But Brad Marchand, 65 points, will eat into any support he would get for the Hart Trophy. Marchand is out on the ice doing all the little things too. He passes the puck quite often to Pastrnak, so does Bergeron. The three of them playing on the same line together would eat into the idea that any one of the three deserves the Hart Trophy. This is why Bergeron doesn't get Hart votes. Because it's usually a team effort with Boston, so they're not really a Hart Trophy type team. So that'll hurt Pastrnak. Now, Buffalo's a bit of a different story. Jack Eichel's got 62 points. The closest to him on the points for the Buffalo Sabres is Reinhart with 41. Yeah. So Eichel is far and away the best player on Buffalo offensively. He has been able to go on these long point streaks more than once this year. Eichel should get serious consideration, but if the Buffalo Sabres fail to make the playoffs, that will definitely affect how many votes he gets cast in his favor at all. And I'm talking not just first, but first, second, third, and so on. Eichel, I would make the argument, should be in the conversation, but again, the team may very well hold him back, and I know that is something that we've had a discussion about before, and we're having that discussion again. Patrick Kane, much the same situation. Chicago currently sitting outside a playoff spot. They look like they're cruising into a playoff spot. Patrick Kane is a major reason this team is cruising up towards a playoff spot. 62 points for Kane, same as Eichel. Next on the points list is Jonathan Toews, who, while he's been very good lately, is sitting with 44 points. That's 18 behind Patrick Kane. They don't often play on the same line. It's considered the nuclear options, what they call it, and puts them together. But it doesn't happen every game, and it doesn't happen all the time in any game. So Patrick Kane, to me, deserves definitely some consideration, and he would be the MVP of the team, right? So what you're looking for is a team where clearly he's the best player. Now, for me, I think the vote right now would go to Nathan MacKinnon. Colorado, despite some bumps they've had along the way, 70 points for Nathan MacKinnon right now. The next highest scoring leader is Cale Makar with 35. Now, Rantanen's had injuries. Landeskog's had injuries. Rantanen would be number 2 on this list without the injuries. But still, the optics are simple. Nathan MacKinnon with 70 points. Well on his way to over 100 points. Without Nathan MacKinnon, Colorado, not in the playoffs. I'm serious. I think without Nathan MacKinnon, this team's not in the playoffs. And I think they would be struggling to get any wins at all most nights. So, for me, Nathan MacKinnon right now would get the vote if I had a vote, and I don't. Oilers, the problem is you got two guys on the Oilers you could maybe make an argument for. Now, defensively, Draisaitl has had some misadventures, and that would hurt his Hart voting. But McDavid has 76 points. Draisaitl has 75. It is hard to make the argument that one or the other is necessarily the biggest impact. Think of it this way. So if you want to make the argument that McDavid is the guy, right? The Oilers make the playoffs, McDavid has to win the Hart Trophy. But without Draisaitl, would they be in the playoffs? And vice versa. If you're going to make the argument, well, Draisaitl's been a bigger star than McDavid this year. Okay, but without McDavid, right? So it's kind of a co-MVP of Draisaitl and McDavid. I think we can all agree if they didn't have both, they're the worst team in the league, or at least they're close. But with both, can you vote for one over the other? Maybe McDavid wins the Hart this year. I will say this, the Ted Lindsay Award, which is given to the best player in the league according to the National Hockey League players who vote on it, I would think the Ted Lindsay Award goes to Connor McDavid. I would be very surprised if Connor McDavid doesn't win that. And despite how close he and Draisaitl are, and MacKinnon and Pasternak are in that conversation, I'd be very surprised if McDavid doesn't take home an Art Ross Trophy this year as well. So that's the problem with the Oilers, is that they have more than one guy who can do it. Jonathan Huberdeau in Florida kind of come out of nowhere. He has 64 points. So you look at Kane and Eichel and the amazing seasons they're having, Huberdeau has more points. Now, his goals haven't been tremendous, but they've been pretty good, and he has a ton of helpers. Second on the team list in points is Barkov with 51. Barkov would eat into support for Huberdeau. There would be people who would say, well, yeah, Huberdeau got 64 points, but how many of them could be attributed to Sasha Barkov? And Barkov himself might get some votes. Barkov may get Selke votes as well. It will all lead into whether or not Huberdeau is seen as the MVP of the National Hockey League, the Hart Trophy winner. So that would hurt Huberdeau, but I wanted to have him on the board because to me he has been the best player for Florida, and I'm not sure that it's been close over the last, I'll say, 2 months. Artemi Panarin for the New York Rangers. Well, we know what Panarin's been doing, right? Panarin, 68 points. It's pretty darn good. Again, Kane was 62, Eichel was 62, Panarin was 68. Panarin, when he went to the Rangers, this wasn't supposed to happen. The Rangers aren't a team that was a tremendous goal-scoring power, and it was seen that going from Columbus to the Rangers might get a little bit of a bump, but not a lot. And that Panarin, that contract, seemed mildly crazy on the Rangers' behalf when they signed it. Right now, it looks all right. Now, long-term, we have no idea how it's going to look. But right now, it looks like a pretty smart investment. And Strome is second on this list of points for the Rangers with 42. Now, Strome has been helped by Panarin. So, Strome having 42 points is a little different than Barkov having 51 points for Florida, because while you can look and say Barkov's helped Huberdeau get to where he is, I don't think there's anybody going, well, yeah, Panarin's good, but it's because he's playing with Ryan Strome. Let's just be honest here. So, yeah, there's nobody saying that. Now, the opposite can be true, which is people saying, well, Strome's numbers have been pretty good. Playing with Panarin helps. Panarin has shown this year with the Rangers he can be a game changer. Now, whether or not they make the playoffs is going to affect voting. So if they don't make the playoffs, I don't think Panarin wins it. But it would be hard to argue him out of being top 3 right now. It'd be difficult to argue him out. Because again, Eichel may not make the playoffs either. You can make the argument that Eichel and Panarin won't both make the playoffs. So one or the other may very well get a bunch of voting in their favor when the regular season ends based on whether or not their team makes the playoffs. I wanted to end off with, and then we'll go back over them, I wanted to end off with Evgeny Malkin in Pittsburgh. Now, here's where it gets tricky. He has 50 points. Tied for second with 43 points are Rust and Gensel. What holds Malkin back here is Malkin was fantastic while Crosby was out, but Crosby's back. Crosby should, knock on wood, be healthy the rest of the year. Crosby's going to get his share of points. Malkin will take his place as the number 2 guy. Being the number 2 guy would rule him out for consideration for the Hart. So, with all of that considered, who would I think ends up winning it? Again, for me, it's MacKinnon. But for top three, I would think that if Eichel, Kane, or Panarin, if their teams make the playoffs, they have to be top three. Now, they're not all going to make the playoffs. I personally would have Panarin in my top three right now, even though they're not in the playoffs. But again, it's a general rule to win it. You kind of have to be there. So I would have Panarin as a top three guy. I would love to have McDavid in the top three. But again, Draisaitl to me kind of cancels McDavid out. You're looking for the guy that without him, that team is sunk. So if Kuemper comes back and plays well, and if he can get Arizona first place, like I said, I could see it being Kuemper, MacKinnon, and Panarin as your three for the Hart Trophy. That being said, I think it's really wide open this year. I could see McDavid going on a tear and Draisaitl kind of falling off. I could see people looking at the defensive numbers and saying, you know what? The plus minus put up by Draisaitl rules him out, and we'll nominate McDavid, and then maybe McDavid gets the Hart that way. It's going to be very, very interesting to see. So let me know what you guys think. Who do you think deserves the Hart? And again, if you don't see a team on the board, it's not that I don't think the team's good. It's that I think the team's really good, and they don't have any one player that without them, they'd be done. And I do see that with MacKinnon. I do see it with Panarin. I definitely see it with Eichel as well. You can make that argument with Pastrnak, but that argument would be that entire line is what the Bruins are relying on, not just any one player. But let me know your thoughts in the comment section below as always. Don't forget to hit like and subscribe if you're browsing your way through. You just happened upon this video. And hey, thank you guys so much for watching, for all your support. I'll talk to you again soon.